one. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a great question. This is one where, we are so busy that I think we tend to forget this. And I firmly believe that everybody has a superpower. And I'm just wondering today if somebody came up to you on the side of the road and said, "Hey, what's your superpower? What in the world would you say it is?" And so while you're thinking about that, I found somebody that has like a really weird, no offense, John, but a really weird superpower, and it's curiosity. And I'm like, my gosh, that's pretty darn cool. So I had to get him on the show. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Jon Bassford. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, hey, you are a consultant, a speaker, and an author. And this curiosity kind of is interwoven into a lot of what you do. You've done a TED Talk, wrote a book on it. So, how did this come about for you? Where did that curiosity superpower come from?
The superpower itself has always been there. When I look back at my childhood, all the way through my profession, it's always been there, but it wasn't always, top of mind. Like I never thought about, hey, my superpower is curiosity. A couple of years back, I was in a career change, and a colleague of mine introduced me to a colleague of hers who's in academia, whose specialty is helping people to define their superpower. So after some questionnaires and some interviews, he came back as curiosity as mine. And to be honest with you, like I didn't do a whole lot with it. At this point, I'd been running some organizations. I have a law degree, an MBA. I've done some cool stuff, and it didn't resonate with me. I was like, okay, that's wonderful, great. Then fast forward a couple years ago, I was working with a branding company, and same kind of deep dive into who I am and what makes me tick and what I've done throughout my life and career, and curiosity came up again. So that's when I finally really kind of took note of it. I really began to analyze curiosity throughout my life and really could see a through line there from, a child who, questions things and is curious about learning and growing all the way to my profession where I've really carved out this niche of helping organizations question their operations and find new ways to learn, grow, and succeed.
Wow. So there's some two words there that I want to hone in on. You said career change. So we have a lot of people listening around the world right now, John, that really are interested to hear each week the stories of how you transition from corporate America into owning your own business. So you were in the association management world. Um, I don't how is law in I mean, my gosh, association management law degree. Where was there any connection there, or was it just was that another transition for you?
Yeah. I mean, there's some elements of randomness to my career. There's no doubt about that. So, very few people in the world ever, no matter what they're doing, ever set out to say, "Hey, I want a career in association management." It just kind of tends to happen. The same with me. I came out of law school not knowing what I wanted to do with my law degree, and fell into working for a legal association as a member of a law school, and just thought it was going to be a quick little sidestep a year or two, then figure out what I wanted to do, and ended up building a career around that initially. But even
Okay.
within that career in association management, I also did a shift from the membership, volunteer side to the internal operations side.
And like, oh my gosh, I mean, there's like no connection. So that's, but
Yeah.
you were working for a law association, which is how you got into the management piece. When you were in that or growing up in corporate America, did you have any thought that eventually you were going to own your own business, be an entrepreneur, be a consultant? Was that somewhere in your brain, or was that not there early on?
Not really there early on. I mean, I think I've always had a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, and because even while I was working W-2, I did some real estate stuff on the side and had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit.
Sure.
But I really had my eyes set on it, throughout those first couple of years, and is becoming COO of a national organization. And it's funny, I finally achieved that in one of my roles. And then there was something that really kind of stuck out that kind of helped me transition to consulting, which was I'd been pitching the founder and CEO something for weeks, if not months, that we should make this transition on something. And someone finally mentioned it to him who doesn't work in the organization, and he brought it to me like he had the first thing he'd ever heard. I'm like, I've been telling you this for weeks and months, and so that was like, there's something that went off my brain. Is like, if you really want to make a difference, you
Yeah,
got to be seen as the expert. No matter how
yeah,
good I was as a W-2 employee, I was an employee, and I
yeah.
wanted to be seen as that expert, and that's really what began my transition to consulting.
Sure. Well, and I think you bring up a good point, John, because there are a lot of people listening right now that will have a side hustle, we'll call it, while they're doing their day job. And again, we put the claim disclaimer out there every week. We talk about this. There's no right or wrong for us. We had one guy that got married 6 days later, quit his job, came home and told his wife, "Hey, I'm going to start my own business. Have no clue what it's going to be." Didn't go over well. They stayed married, but there's certain do's and don'ts on that one. That was a definite don't, but we don't again, say yay or nay on any of this. That transition for you, were you comfortable with the side hustle and kind of dabbling in the real estate and just having your day job? Eventually, that just did that not scratch the itch, so to speak? Is that what happened?
Yeah, yeah, not really. I wanted like my core, my core duties being on the consulting side, and even while I was certain different times with my W-2 career, I did do some side consulting even what I was doing, and
Okay.
actually makes me think of a quote Gary Vaynerchuk, is influencer out there right now for small business entrepreneurship, and he once I heard him say that young professionals what they should do is go find the job that pays the most for the least amount of time and then build your side hustle. I always
Mm,
kind of thought that was, I understand what he means, but just like it didn't sit well with me until I moved to consulting. And
yeah.
when I moved to consulting, I realized I was working 60, 80 hours a week for these organizations where, yes, I increased my salary, I increased my titles, but not in
Yeah.
the same trajectory as my effort, right?
Sure.
And I wish I would have spent more time building a consultancy on the side
Yeah.
instead of working 60 80 hours, still work my 40 to 50 hours, but take that extra 20 30 hours and do something more on the side to really boost my experience and my revenue.
And did you know what it was? Because again, I'm guessing right now, John, there's people listening going, "Hey, I love that idea. I don't want to work 70, 80 hours a week anymore for the man, so to speak. I'd love to back it down and try a side hustle." But I think a lot of people get stuck right there because they're like, "I don't know what to do." So like what advice, what encouragement would you have for somebody that's kind of stuck right at that spot? They see the opportunity. They just, quite frankly, wouldn't know if, they should start refinishing furniture or if they should, get their law degree. They have no clue what that next step is. What encouragement do you have for them, John?
Yeah, I mean, if you have no idea what you want to do, I think it's always good to kind of work with someone who consults, in that kind of personal development, right? Help you finding your purpose, helping you do these things. I think it can be very, very helpful in working with some kind of coach that helps you go down that route. But, in the simple terms, I'd say look at a couple of things, do a deep dive into who you are, what your skill set is, what's that secret thing that you bring to the world. Make sure that it's something you do enjoy doing as well. That's the other component is if you
Sure.
don't enjoy doing it, you're gonna quit.
Yeah.
So you start with those two components and then say, okay, how can I monetize this? And one of the best things to do if your audience hasn't played in ChatGPT or some other AI tool,
Yeah.
put it in there. Have a conversation with ChatGPT. Hey, look, I want to start a side business. This is what I've done in my career. This is what I enjoy doing on my side, on my personal time, and have a dialogue with them even
Sure.
to see what it is that you guys can come up with for an idea, a business plan, everything.
Yeah. And that's where I think it's scary for a lot of people because it's all, it's one thing to have that like, hey, I wish I could, right? It's another thing to all of a sudden do what you just said, like create a business plan, do a deep dive with yourself. I mean, and as coaches, we struggle getting people to slow down enough to be able to do that deep dive. When you did it for yourself, because you mentioned it a couple times, was it like an easy process or because some people are really intimidated just by stopping and sitting and with a blank sheet of paper or doing an assessment or meeting with somebody. What did you do? What was kind of your first step when you realized that you wanted to, pursue that?
Yeah, so I mean, I will admit that when I made that first step, okay, things were wrapping up the organization I was working for. I knew I wanted to do consulting. I didn't quite have every detail mapped out. I knew what I was doing and how I could help organizations, but I didn't know quite how it was going to be packaged and everything. Luckily for me, I had two former bosses within a month of me leaving W-2 and switching to consulting. One said came to me and said, "Hey, I'm starting a new for-profit, a new nonprofit. I need you to launch operations for me," which was again something I'd done in my past. And the other one said, "Hey, I know what you're doing for him. I know someone who else needs that done." And so I
Yeah,
quickly had three clients within 6 months, and then stayed on as
yeah,
a fractional COO for them. So it did kind of come to me fairly easily, but it also came fairly easily to me because I had carved out a niche, right? There was something I was known for in launching and managing efficient and effective operations. So when the time came and I was out on my own, it kind of fell in my lap, so to speak, but because of what I had built in my W-2 career.
yeah. Wow. That's crazy. I love that. I love that piece. But I think, again, I want to encourage the listener today that it takes some effort to
Mhm.
figure that out. I like that Chat GBT option of just start talking to Chat GBT about, different ideas. Who knows where that'll take you, whether it's a franchise or starting your own thing or partnering with somebody. Again, it might be a side hustle where you just do something a couple hours a week. um, but I just hate listening to people that, keep saying, I want to do it, but they never make that jump,
Yeah,
because that's got to be really like hope is starting to disappear at that point. If you start
yeah,
thinking in your mind, I'm stuck here for the next 30 years, 50 weeks a year, excuse me, that doesn't sound appealing either. So sometimes I'm guessing the pain becomes great enough to
mhm.
where you start really looking at something outside of your day job. Was there any pain for you, or was it all just like, I can't wait to get out of here? Just curious if you had some struggles there.
Yes and no. Looking back at my W-2 career, I've had some interesting places I worked, different interesting bosses I had. Look, I've learned and grown from every single boss I've had, every organization I worked for. But yeah, there's definitely struggles, in fighting the founder syndrome in some cases, and not, wanting to bring about change in the person above you, just not quite ready for that, or you've pushed too much for change, and now it's become, roadblocks. So there definitely was some big pain points that I was having. And for the audience who, just, you know, we could always just sit here and say, use the burn the boat mentality, right? Like, so there's no backup plan, jump in with both feet, dive head first, whatever analogy you want to use here.
Yeah,
But again, like, you don't have to start that way. If you are nervous and scared, like, again, figure out one thing, one service that you can offer somebody, and
yeah,
then go find the places where those people exist and just find one client, right? Find one client first. You don't have to dive head first. I did because we were transitioning the COO role out of my organization, so I was being laid off in a sense. So it kind of worked out well for me because I was, in that transition anyways. But you don't have to, give up your W-2 job to jump into this. Start small, start with one client, see how it goes, see if you like it. As much as I kind of talked about different aspects of my career and life kind of falling in my lap, so to speak, running my consultancy for the last 7 years, it's not a piece of cake. I've had ups and downs, I've had good years and bad years. I'm on
yeah.
my third kind of iteration of what my services are and what we're
Sure,
trying to do to, help our clients and help
sure.
individuals and organizations grow. So it's not an easy road. You got to be committed to it and want it for sure.
Well, and I think you pointed out something a little bit before that I want to circle back to, and you said align with someone. I think it's really, so there's two schools of thought, right? There's the entrepreneur that's like, I don't need anybody, I can do this on my own. Screw you for, you're just going to take money from me. I can do it on my own. And I'm like, absolutely, you can. More power to you. But boy, I tell you what, there's also a group of people that it's like, in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. There's, well, a lot of people are around, like someone can help you with your blind spot. Our next book we're working on is on business blind spots. And it's like everyone's got them. And it's
Mhm.
like, who helps you with your blind spot? If you're that guy or girl that doesn't need anyone, man, you're gonna get the likelihood of getting stuck are pretty high. Did you have a lot of people along the way for you to help you? And were you aligning with people on a pretty regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, I would again, even looking back at my W-2, like the advancement of my career was all because I was willing to make chances, take chances in my roles, but also because I had bosses who weren't just bosses, but were mentors and let me
Yeah,
try new things, help me, encourage me to try new things, right? So there's that aspect of it. Yeah, throughout my career, I've been a part of masterminds and worked with executive coaches and have taken assessments. Like again, the curious nature of me, I love taking personality assessments. I love
yeah,
seeing if what spits out on this piece of paper, this PDF, is going to match how I see myself. And so I dive into that stuff, right? I love, you can, I'm a pretty self-aware person, so nothing, things don't, surprise me a whole lot, but I
sure.
love diving into that. And I think it's absolutely crucial to truly know who you are. If you want to go the furthest in life, you got to start with knowing who you are.
Yeah, that's really cool. And we have asked all our guests to take a disc assessment. It just helps me better understand how to communicate with you. You and I are like spot on, to the identical. So I'm like, all right, this is going to go quick. This is going to be a really, high powered, like, get this, we're going to hit the ground running. There's not going to be a lot of small talk. We're jumping right in. And I think, again, to your point, John, it's so helpful to know that about yourself. And then it's helpful to start to know that about your team and people around you. So, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to turn the corner and I want to talk about the superpower because I'm guessing that there's people that have some reasons why they don't want to know their superpower or haven't thought that. So, we're going to unpack those when we come back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Jon Bassford, consultant, speaker, and author of The Curious Leader, and excited to check this out because superpowers kind of are scary at some point because you can sometimes feel like I don't want to think more of myself than I should. I don't want to have this big ego. But there's like reasons that people don't want to know what their superpower is. And I think I wrote a couple down and I kind of wanted to get your feedback on that. I run into people, John, that say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like life has been going okay the way it is right now for me. I don't know my superpower. I don't want to know my superpower. For that guy or girl, what would your advice be for them in that situation?
Yeah, so two things. One is, yes, it's working for now. But the
Yeah,
thing about, things are working just fine is you're not on an island. Like we all know the saying, the only constant is change. Things are
right.
changing around you constantly, and what you're doing may work for now, but there's going to come a time where things are changing too much around you or no longer will. At the same time, I'm also a believer that like not everyone has to want the same things out of life. Not everyone has
Yeah,
to want entrepreneurship and to leave a legacy and this and that and make an impact, right? So, first, find out like if that's not you and you don't care about those things, then maybe don't worry about your superpower. It's those people who do want to make those kind of impacts. That's who needs to be focused on their superpower.
yeah. And your curiosity superpower, you said you knew it as a kid, you had it as a kid. How do you right now, like how do you scratch that itch? How do you fill that need? How do you get that curiosity, to be quenched in your day-to-day life?
Sure. So in my personal life, like I'm always striving for more, always looking for new opportunities, new ways to grow, get new clients, help new people, earn money, that sort of thing. Then in my work itself, my role for most organizations is to come in, analyze. what the organization is doing and find the gaps and the holes that are hindering their growth. I mean, that's what I'm doing for these organizations is help them streamline their operations and find new ways to do things, help them shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So I'm using my curiosity to come into
Sure.
their business to help them get curious about their business so they can grow and innovate.
How do you get somebody that's not naturally curious to become curious? Because just like we talked about the personalities for us, there are personalities that are just like, hey, I don't need to know that. But yet they want it. It's interesting. They want to grow, but yet they want to stay where they're at, and I love that you can't keep your foot on first and steal second. There is some risk that's there, so how do you help people with that risk? Because risk averse people tend to really just get stuck right at this spot.
Yeah, show them one win. If you show them one win, like what some, I think a lot of people are afraid of change and taking risks because they see innovation, growth, and change as these big, huge things, right? Capital expenditures, rehaul our entire company and organization, but really making these small incremental changes and how you do things and why you do things can go a long way. I'm working with a startup right now where the founder kind of controls everything, and I'm like everyone's seeing everything. I'm getting him to walk away from that. And I showed him a new way we can run accounts payable. He's like, this
Sure.
is going to be fantastic, right? I showed him one win, like one
Yeah,
way, different way of looking at how to do this. And he's like, yeah,
sure.
I'm going to save time. I'm going to save money. So show them that win and they'll start slowly catching on.
That's awesome. So for you, if you're listening, that's really just thinking, I think sometimes we think there's going to be these massive changes, and we say the same thing. It's like small incremental changes in business really are a huge effect down the road. We live part-time in San Diego. We have a house there. And so if you take off in Milwaukee and head towards the West Coast, and the pilot puts in a 2-degree course correction, which no one's going to notice on the airplane, but you end up in LA, which is 2.5 painful hour drive south to get to San Diego. So when we think, oh, these little incremental changes aren't going to do anything, boy, you just wait a little bit and they're massive. Are most of the changes that you're working with your clients, are they pretty small on the surface that yield big results down the road?
Yeah, usually, every now and then, there's, hey, you need to launch a new product or service. But again, it's usually something that's being carved out from something already existing, right? It's not we make refrigerators and all of a sudden we're going to make automobiles, right? Like it's
Yeah,
not that big of a shift, but it's
sure.
usually a lot of our work we do is process.
Okay.
How you do this, how you do that, working with culture, working with, just creating those mechanisms to where not just yourself, but your entire team can be on the lookout of what's working, what's not working, fix things as they happen, look at it as kind of agile development in the software space, and just constantly tweaking things for improvement. And for most founders, CEOs, owners, if I could give you back 10 hours of your time a week, would that be worth for you to grow your business versus being
Yeah.
stuck in the business, right? Those are the kind of things that we really look at.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and you bring up the team, and that's where I think, in addition to knowing yourself, like you were talking about, as you develop your team and grow your team, now you got to start to know them as well, because you will run into people who naturally are in that thought process of, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or the other one, which is equally as evil as, you know what, that's just how we do things around here. Grandpa did them this way, great grandpa did it this way. And I'm like, well, great grandpa didn't have a computer, so why do you guys have a website? So you kind of start to blow a few holes in that thought process. But do you run into those people as well, John, that are like, hey, you know what? Grandpa did it this way. That's just how we're doing it around here. Is that you run into that still?
I certainly do. And if I hear those words, we've been doing this for whatever years and it's working just fine. I'm
Yeah.
like, great, good for you. I don't even try.
Yeah.
Like if it's assuming this is pre-engagement, right? Like if this is
Yeah.
a discovery call,
Yeah.
that's great. Like I want to work with people. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to know the solutions. You don't even have to be comfortable with change. but just someone who knows they got to change. Like they
Yeah.
know things aren't right. They know things
Yeah.
could be better. Those are the people I work with. You mentioned, the internet. I had a client that I was working with, and I was pitching moving to video content. And the answer I got was, that's not how I envisioned this company 27 years ago when I founded it. I'm like, you mean before Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, you didn't envision video content being the main
Yeah.
driver of content? Like, are you kidding
Right.
me? Because you'd be
Yeah.
in a lot different place if you had. So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
people gotta really dive deep and look internal and see what they're capable of and change.
Yeah. And those are really well said words. They're just so hard for entrepreneurs to do. And I think the second one that I wanted to unpack was when somebody says, you know what, John, I'm just afraid of what I'm going to find if I do a deep dive in myself or in my company. There's some, what is there? There's bliss in ignorance, right? Ignorance is bliss, right? And no news is good news. I mean, there's these things that we think about. And so when you run into somebody that says, man, I'm just scared to death of what I'm going to find, what would your encouragement be for them if they're listening right now?
Yeah, I mean those phrases you use, ignorant is bliss, etc. Like I would use a different one. Knowledge is power. It's
Yeah.
all about knowledge, right? Like it's in reframing the fact that we may discover something in ourselves or in our business that isn't optimal, that isn't right, that is a little scary, but focus on the knowledge. That by having the knowledge, that gives you the tools, the resources, the direction to shift things, right? And I often, in organizations where I'm helping them change, I often don't use the word change.
Okay.
Because it's like, well, I've been doing the same thing for 5 years because that's what I've been told to do, and now you're telling me to change. They get defensive, right? I'm doing what I've been told to do. Why are you telling me I'm doing something wrong? So I use the term redirection.
Sure.
We
Okay.
will redirect you. Like we've learned some knowledge now that what we are doing is not working. So let's redirect you down this path.
Yeah. And it does, I mean, it's hard to keep up with that change. I mean, fax machines, computers, email, all this Zoom. I mean, pre-COVID, I was like, there's no way I could coach on. I didn't even know what Zoom was pre-2020, right? And I'm like, there's no way I would ever coach on that. And then all of a sudden, a lot of our businesses shut down and went virtual. So you didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. Hopefully, you're ahead of the things. If you're forced into it by the government or your competitor, your customer, you seem to be too late to the game. And that's what I think is helpful, again, about having people around you, masterminds or, CEO roundtables, things like that, because people can help you with things you just can't see. And do you get people that don't have a superpower, they don't know what it is, and then you kind of help them find that? Is that pretty common for you?
Yeah. My expertise is not necessarily helping them find their superpower, but certainly tapping into something, right? Tapping into something, helping them understand, and maybe I'm shortchanging this, and maybe this is their superpower, but finding that secret sauce, like what is it that they are good at? Because
Yeah.
what I also find in small business owners is they often tend to outsource their
Okay.
zone of genius and then
Yep.
fall back into the areas that are left, which are not their zone of genius, usually the operations, right? And so, like, big part of me is like, let's find out where you can play the biggest role, even in your own company, right? Like let's have you focus on those areas, not focus on the areas that you don't. So, helping them kind of really understand where their zone of genius is, which again kind of goes to their superpower, is vitally important.
Yeah. Well, and especially for business owners, the last business that I own, we got it started at $0, excuse me, grew it to 10 million in annual sales before I sold it. And my superpower was in relationships and in selling. I could sell, ice to Eskimos, and then you have people. I had no interest in the the AR, AP, the money side, I was like, you know what? And people would come to me and they're like, Dave, we're not having a good month. The whole computer screen is red. I'm like, you guys click one button and the whole thing turns to black, you know? That was my thinking. And they're like, dude, that's not how this works, you know? And so I had to operate early on out of my superpower as well because I almost it was almost like I knew what I wasn't good at. I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at finances. I wasn't good at the money side. And so, I had to learn that over time. But naturally, that was not where my strength was. My strength was with people and with making connections that way. So, whether you do a disc or you do strength finder, some assessments generally are going to help you to be able to do that deep dive on what your superpower is. So um, don't be afraid of what you'll find. I mean, the other fear is just, again, ignorance is bliss. I've run into plenty of people that thought they were doing good. I mean, look at all these big chains around the country that are closing and filing bankruptcy, things you'd never think were issues. I mean, they all of a sudden they're closing, and I almost feel like those guys are in that blind spot world. How does that work where you're rising up and then you fall apart? I mean, it just something had to have happened somewhere, right? Where somebody saw something. I mean, I think of the famous story about Netflix and Blockbuster, 9,000 stores to one because some guy, buys Apollo 13 and he's 3 days late and he gets the brilliant idea to start Netflix. And then he had the opportunity, Blockbuster had the opportunity twice to buy Netflix and didn't do it. Do you run into people that are like that afraid that they're like paralyzed where they can't move? They're like, John, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, 100%. They rarely do they ever say, "John, I don't know what to do." We have all heard the saying of paralysis by analysis. I
Yep.
actually think that's a misnomer. The issue isn't over analysis. The issue is indecision. They cover up the indecision by over analysis. And so
Yeah.
I tackle the indecision. I help people kind of like, what is the information that we need to get? So we have can make a sound decision and then execute on that decision.
Sure.
Those are the steps we take is asking the right questions. What resources do we need? Who do we need to go to help you find the right answer so that you are comfortable in it, even though it's not your wheelhouse, you're a zone of genius, get you enough information, tap into the right people that you are
Yeah.
secure in that. But yeah, I run into that all the time with my clients.
Wow. And I gotta believe there are certain people that have a line that you can't cross. As far as like, you can examine me, but you were stopping here, whatever here is, because curiosity keeps asking questions. I'm assuming that's a big part of that for you, right? Is asking questions?
100%. A lot of times when I was, in my W-2 roles and even a consultant, I'm sitting back, I'm listening to the team talk, and then I'm asking questions, usually
Yeah,
towards the end, because I want to see what the team is thinking, where their mindset is, that sort of thing. And I come at the end and like, okay, so ask some questions like make sure I'm understanding this correctly, and then come back and say, okay, this is how I'm seeing this. Is this correct, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt in my last W-2 role that when I was brought as a change agent for this organization, that it got to a point where I'd brought too much change.
yeah,
Like I think that there was a small little thing I was pushing for that ended up kind of being like no, I'm not doing anymore. He didn't say those words to me, but that was certainly the perception I got, and kind of things slowed down from there. And it wasn't that one thing. It just was the tip of the iceberg that just kind of
sure,
made it stop, right? And so, again, the key is also very important in my role and throughout my career is managing up appropriately, so you are bringing the right amount of change, the right cadence to make
sure.
sure that you're not scaring the individuals.
Well, and especially at our speed for our personality, we tend to, I always say, hey, I'm not ready, aim, fire. I fire, and then if I got time, I'm ready. And if I gave more time, I'll aim. Obviously has its problems if you're just firing, willy-nilly like that. But I think it's helpful for people to understand that there are people on their team that will naturally resist change.
Mhm.
It's not that they wake up and they're trying to, bust your chops. They're not trying to mess the company up. They just are built in a way where they're afraid of change. So you have to deal with those people different. I'm assuming in your world, you get people that are like, all right, let's do this. They jump in both feet and like they love it. And then there's people that are like, whoa, wait a minute here. We got to do some analysis and we got to this, we got to that. And it's a much longer process. Do you see kind of both sides in your travels?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the audits that we do on companies is adaptability, like looking at the entire team's capacity for change, because I think it's vitally important. And again, by no means am I suggesting that someone is scores low on this that you fire them, but it does teach you, show you who you have to spend more time with, who you have to walk things through a little bit, hold their hand a little bit more. But at the same time, if you talk to culture experts, they will tell you that if you're truly changing your culture, people will be leaving or you'll be firing people. There is
Yep.
if that's not happening, you're not changing enough. So do
Sure.
expect that not everyone's going to be along for the ride. You make it empathetic, make it human. You'll care about your people, but you also
Yeah.
want your company to have the right people in it, and you want your people working for the right company. And it's best as early as possible to find out if that's going to still be a good mix.
Wow. You just pissed off a lot of people, John. People just are like, hey, I just filled the chairs. I don't care they're not engaged. I mean, the research shows, from who does that? Gallup, sorry.
Yeah.
Gallup says 2 out of 3 people are not engaged in their job in the U.S. workforce. So, those are the people that are not going to stick around. You change that culture, and now you have expectations and you have all these things going on. They're not going to be happy, and that quiet quitting is going to get challenged. So, I'm glad that you pointed that out. The last one as we start to land the plane today is the classic. I'm just too busy to
Mm.
find my superpower. I'm too busy to do any of this deep dive kind of stuff. How do you, outside of saying, hey, you're right and leave, what would your encouragement be, to somebody that says, John, I'm just too busy to do this. I got to make rent. I got to make this. I got to do that. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking before about like if your head's down, doing things so much, and you don't have time for these little bitty things to improve yourself, improve your organizations, that you're not going to have your head up to see what's coming and not coming, right? Like if you're that heads down, you think that you are doing what you need to do to survive. We'll use the Titanic as an example. You're going to miss the iceberg, right? So,
Yeah.
so it might be working for now. You might be surviving for now, but there's an iceberg ahead. And if you're that busy to take 10 minutes on a disc assessment or strength finders or 1 hour a week to work with an executive coach or purpose driven coach, whatever it may be, you're going to miss the iceberg. And I'd much rather, me talking to them, like, I'd much rather have my head up, looking at the landscape, figuring out what's going on. How can I, let's spend 1 hour to figure out how I can get 5 hours back in my time, right?
Yeah.
That is way more use of your time than just merely saying, I don't have enough time.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't have enough time to change and work on yourself and work on your company, then you gotta. I'm looking like there's got to be some priorities off. There's got to be something because this is all you got. I
Yeah.
mean, if you don't work on your company, who is?
Right.
And if it's your company and everyone's looking to you, you're the one that's steering the ship. So if your hands aren't on the wheel, where the it doesn't
Yeah.
end well there. So are there any other kind of excuses that you hear or reasons or things that, resistance when people are talking about this stuff that we didn't cover here?
Not so much reasons for resistance, but I do want to point out something about resistance.
Okay.
We as human beings are created, our minds, our bodies are created for survival. So, comfort, habits, fear, these are all
Yep.
very innate things that have helped us evolve, get to where we are. They help us get through our daily lives. If you read about, the power of habits, like without habits, you would not be able to turn a doorknob, right? It'd take you 3 hours. So all of these things are very important in our lives and innate in who we are as human beings,
Yeah.
but they are the enemy of innovation, growth, and change. And so you got to embrace who you are, embrace that feelings are natural, and then find little mechanisms to break free from that.
Wow, that's awesome. And sometimes we look at resistance and we go the opposite direction, take the easy way, totally get it. It sounds fun, it feels better at the moment, but usually you look back and go, crap, why did I do that? I wish I would have. And when you're saying I wish I would have, it's like, man, you know what? It's not too late. Let's recalibrate and let's try it again. So, um, that's awesome. What would your two questions? I'm gonna let you go. What would your tip of the day be, John, for somebody listening? Maybe it's something we covered already, and maybe it's something we haven't. But what would your tip of the day be today?
Yeah, I'm going to use a quote from the great Taoist philosopher Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. Originally quoted by Walt Whitman. But like to me, that's the key, right? Is be curious about yourself, your organization, your people, everything, but don't be judgmental, even to yourself. Like give yourself some latitude and some leeway to say, hey, look, I'm afraid, but that's okay. That's natural. But then find ways to be curious and move around that.
And I think that those two kind of are natural, right? That curiosity is going to lead to judgment because your curiosity is going to lead you to somewhere you're not doing as well as you could. Like for me, my curiosity led me to realize that I didn't like math and I didn't like QuickBooks. So, rather than be judgmental of myself, I'm like, just go find somebody that's good at it that likes it. It's so much easier. There's plenty of people in this world that just geek out on this kind of stuff, and find them and let them do it. So well said. That's awesome. For people listening, John, that want to learn more about you, they want to connect with you, something that we talked about today, it stirred them to want to connect and learn more about what you do as a consultant, or maybe get you as a speaker. What would the best way be for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'll give you three things here real quick. Two websites. My consulting is think-lateral.com. And then my personal brand, more on the speaking side, is jonbassford.com. That's Jon, no H, Bass Fish Ford Car. And then, so we talk so much about change. I actually have, if an individual wants to take our adaptability assessment for free, they can
Okay.
actually text the word change to 33777, and they'll be able to take that adaptability test for free.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to read it. So we have think-lateral.com. We have johnbassford.com. And then we have texting change to 33777. Did I get those right?
Yep, I am just double checking one thing real quick. Yes, sorry, one
That's
change
right.
here. We
Uh-oh.
are text the word adapt to three
Adapt.
three seven seven seven. Change was already taken. I kind of thought that in the back of my head. So text the word adapt to 33777, and you'll be able to take
Perfect.
that free assessment.
Awesome. Adapt, ADAPT, and text that to 33777. And just real quick, what's on that assessment?
So it's a really quick assessment. Yeah, it takes about 12-14 minutes, but this is
Okay.
going to dive into who you are and whether or not what kind of capacity for change that you have as an individual and a leader.
Gotcha. And that's really helpful. And as we do disc, most people think I'm going to try to outsmart the system. Don't even bother. There's enough algorithms and stuff. And the reality is if you're trying to answer it the way you think it should be answered rather than the way it's in your heart, it really doesn't help you. So just be honest with the thing and give yourself grace and give yourself a get out of jail free card. It's not a big deal. And just celebrate the fact that you did it. And then do you get you get emailed an assessment, the results come to you then? Is that how that works?
Yeah, yep, it comes to you automatically. So you'll be able to see exactly what came back and what kind of your archetype you are, that sort of thing, and you're kind of your very typical assessment. But it really can help kind of see some blind spots that you may be having in your organization in your life. And really, again, this is like you said, be honest because the power of this is the knowledge you gain.
Yeah.
And without being honest, you're not going to have that knowledge.
Yeah, don't even take it if you can't be honest, and just be as honest as you can. And you're the only one that sees the results, and then you get to decide what to do with it. And I think that's why a lot of people struggle with it because they're like, oh crap, now I got to do something with it, right? But for the people that are listening to podcasts like these, they're already looking to, for change. They're looking for opportunities. So again, text the word adapt to 33777. Get your free assessment, and that will be worth the investment of time that you made today. And Jon, I appreciate you hanging out with us today. It's so cool to see somebody with a superpower. And thanks for not asking a bunch of questions. I was all prepared for like Jon having his rendition of questions. I was like, crap, if he starts nailing me online, I'm gonna have to click the mute button. So I didn't have to do any of that today. So thanks for all that you're doing, and can't wait to keep learning from you. And appreciate your help.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I enjoyed the conversation.